This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 89 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to look at how restorative justice works in school, why it can have a big impact on student behavior, and how you can get started. I usually record these episodes well in advance of the day that they are published, and so my original intro to this episode was already done before we had our most recent school shooting in the U.S. here in Parkland, Florida. So I am recording this extra intro the morning of February 18th because I felt like I didn't want to release the episode without at least mentioning the school shooting and trying to put this episode in context. I had this episode planned, weeks and weeks ago, so obviously I didn't know what was going to be happening in the days leading up to today. And so I feel like so many of us, educators, parents, just regular citizens, we are really at a loss at this point for figuring out how to prevent these things from happening. And everyone has opinions, and those opinions are super polarized. So I don't really want to talk right now about the whole gun issue. I don't feel informed enough about how all of these things work. But I do feel like one piece of making this problem stop has to do with the way that we build relationships and address problems in our schools. And something like restorative justice is a different approach to the way that we typically handle wrongdoing in our schools. And when I say wrongdoing, I'm not talking about something as extreme or severe as a school shooting. I don't even know yet what I think about how restorative justice fits into addressing a problem like this after it's already happened. But I do feel like implementing something like restorative practices in your school in a holistic way could go a long way toward preventing something like this from happening, because it focuses so much on knowing your kids, on the community, knowing your kids, and on teachers really building those relationships between students and between teachers and students. I feel like, and again, I don't feel like I have any answers to this myself, but this seems to be something that could be a part of a solution. Because it seems like a school that is doing a really good job of implementing restorative practices would notice if a child was feeling so marginalized or even demonstrating the signs of a person who was maybe about to do something like this, because it emphasizes so much building those connections and maintaining them. So this is already a long episode. I'm going to stop for now, but I just wanted to sort of put this episode in context and just also not let this date pass without acknowledging the struggle that we're all having right now and the heartbreak that we're all experiencing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and play the original intro and just tell you all that I love you and thank you for sticking it out. And no one would blame you if you decided not to, because this is a very scary time. Thanks. A student threw a chair at a teacher. That's the story I heard. It was a story meant to illustrate how bad a particular group of kids was. And now I can't even remember who the teacher was or where the school was located or even the gender of the teacher or the student. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've heard 2 or 3 different stories about students throwing things at teachers. each one told with the intent of showing just how bad those kids were. But every time I've heard a story like that, my first thought has always been, holy crap, what kind of a relationship did that teacher have with those students? What was going on in the minutes, days, and weeks leading up to that chair being thrown? And I know how that sounds. It sounds like I'm blaming the teacher, or that I don't think a student should be held responsible for doing something as awful as throwing a piece of furniture at another human being. I don't think that. But here's what I think probably happened in all of those schools. The student was removed from class and promptly suspended, maybe even expelled. And if and when that student returned to school, nothing much was done to repair that student's relationship with the teacher, or to really address the other issues that may have been going on leading up to that chair being thrown. And if that kind of work isn't done, if we focus only on making our punishments stricter, then things like chair throwing will keep happening. And nobody wants that. Getting students to behave in a way that is conducive to learning is a perennial challenge for teachers. On this podcast, I have dealt with the topic a number of times, and every piece of advice, all the tips and hacks and bits of wisdom, they are all useful. But one approach to addressing problematic behavior, restorative justice, really stands on its own because it focuses on building relationships and repairing harm, rather than simply punishing students for misbehavior. I've wanted to share more about restorative justice on my site for years, but every time I started, I found that the topic was just too big, too complex to handle all at once. Usually I try to share things that teachers can understand and apply right away, and the concept of restorative justice just wasn't letting me package and deliver it in a tidy little bundle. So rather than try to do that, I'm going to just start with an overview. This will not be a comprehensive study of restorative practices, but an introduction designed for teachers who are just starting to get interested in this approach. Helping me do that is my guest, Victor Small, Jr. Victor is a middle school administrator in Oakland, California. He's been using restorative practices for several years and supports other teachers through a Twitter chat using the hashtag RJLeagueChat and a Voxer group called the Restorative Justice League, where educators talk about the challenges they're facing in implementing restorative practices and help each other work through tough situations. In our interview, Victor walks me through some of the basics of restorative justice, called RJ by many of its practitioners, and talks about how teachers can get started. Over on the site, I've put links to the resources Victor mentions, plus a few book recommendations that can help you learn more. Just go to cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, then go to episode 89. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Pear Deck. Every day, teachers present material through PowerPoint or Google Slides presentations while students watch from their seats. The problem with that model is it doesn't really engage students. Some will tune you out, others might be lost, and not every student wants to speak in front of class. With Pear Deck, you can take that same presentation, add interactive questions, and send it straight to student devices so they can participate in real time. As students engage with your Pear Deck, you see their responses on your device, so you can tell right away who's getting it and who needs help. Built by experienced educators and tested in the real world, Pear Deck is integrated with G Suite for Education and is a fun way to get every learner participating. Pear Deck is offering my listeners a free 30-day premium access trial. Just go to peardeck.com/cultofpedagogy to redeem. I'd also like to thank you for the reviews you've left for this podcast on iTunes. Reviews are really important for a podcast's success, and I read every one of them. If you haven't left a review yet, but you like what I'm doing here, take a few minutes, head over to iTunes, and let me know. Thanks so much. Okay, let's learn about restorative justice in schools. Victor Small, Jr., I would like to welcome you to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. I'm happy to be in the podcast.
And we just got done having a little chat beforehand, and we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to just get right into it. Let's just start off by just letting people know sort of what you do and how long you've been practicing restorative justice.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm this year I'm a middle school administrator in Oakland, California. I work at in a Brewer Middle School. I've taught with RJ for a couple of years, but this year I'm bringing a restorative mindset into my role as an administrator that's really in charge of behavior management with the eighth grade at my school.
Got it. And I've heard you just now say RJ, which having been in, I'm lurking in your restorative justice Voxer chat right now, and so I'm used to now hearing that abbreviation RJ, but you say RJ instead of restorative justice, which makes a lot of sense because restorative justice is a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. It's
Okay.
it is easier and it feels RJ just rolls right off your tongue, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
just such a smooth way to say it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so our goal here, knowing that RJ is huge and complex and does not have one sort of like single clean, like just do it like this and here's what it is. I'm planning on doing more episodes on this. So this is going to be sort of the intro for people who are really just they've heard about it, they want to get started, but they just don't really know where to start. So we're going to try to give people a really good introduction. And I thought
Yeah.
you'd be a good person since you've been right in it for a couple of years now. So
Yeah.
how would you,
Yeah.
yeah, how would you explain restorative justice to someone who had never really heard of it before or just was starting to hear it? How is it different from the way that schools traditionally handle misbehavior?
That's a good question. Okay, so let's start with this. First of all, restorative justice is a system of justice. So what we have rife throughout our country is the criminal justice system, right? And so
Yep.
that's based on assigning punitive measures for, messing up. Like if you commit a crime, even if the crime hurts someone else, you still have to, pay a fine or you have to go and do time behind bars. Something like that. That's really how we deal with issues, based on that justice, right? Or those are
Yep.
the consequences, the outcomes. Restorative justice, instead of, you know, giving you jail time or a fine, we focus on really the harm that was created to the person. So let's say you stole a car, for example, right? If we're applying restorative justice to, you know, um, the country, right? If you
Right.
stole a
Right.
car, instead of you necessarily doing jail time, really what you would have to first do is make sure that you restore the situation to the person who you actually harmed, which would be
Right.
the person whose car you stole, right? So you would have to restore that some way. Either you'd have to get them their car back or get them a new car or, and apologize or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the debt that you owe to society is to that person that you harmed. And so
Right.
when we apply this system in a school setting, what we're essentially teaching students is your behavior has effects that isn't necessarily, you know, out there in the world somewhere. Your behavior affects people. And so in order to pay it forward or to deal with the consequences of that, you're going to have to figure out how to make things right. And so when we talk about restorative justice, we're talking about the system, that systematic idea. When we talk about restorative justice practices, we're talking about the things you're doing as adults on campus to ensure that students are recognizing that they're doing something wrong when they're doing something wrong and finding a way to make it right.
Got it.
And so one of the things that is a large misconception when schools start trying to switch to this, that they're always really interested in trying to make kids be restorative without doing the groundwork. And part of the groundwork is that building the school together as a school culture. So finding ways to get kids, you know, to spend time with each other, to get to know one another, to understand who each other is. You got to give them time to grow with one another. Basically, you're doing team building, you're doing community building, you're having events going on where kids are putting on the events and they're running the events, and they're working together and they're learning more about each other. And that's how you're able, only if you're doing that, if you're setting the groundwork like that, would you be able to get students to be more able to be restorative, if that makes sense.
Right. And so one of the misconceptions you're saying is that people just jump right to the practices that happen after some wrongdoing has happened, as opposed to looking at all the sort of proactive work that happens before you ever get to the point of an incident.
Oh yeah, no, this is, the reason why I'm really a very big proponent of RJ is it if you're doing it right, you're going to prevent a whole lot of issues from occurring. And
Right.
and then and because you've set the groundwork, you've given yourself easy ways to fix them once they start. I mean, point blank, if you've got everybody in the school liking and getting along with one another, well, when they do something wrong, it's a lot easier for that kid to apologize.
Yeah. If they know each other well, they're going to probably, they'll be less likely to assume a negative intent when there are misunderstandings.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right.
But also you keep them from doing harmful things to one another because they know one another. I mean, we as
Right.
human beings are like that. You don't usually do mean stuff to your friends all the time, you know?
Right.
If you
Right.
know, you're less likely to do something, messed up to someone that you know. And if you know everyone and you mildly get along with everyone, well, you're probably not fighting and
Yeah.
you're, you're probably not bullying a whole lot.
So I'm trying to process this now as if I am one of my listeners, and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm a teacher in a school that uses traditional discipline, and they may be thinking, well, we do a lot of team building stuff already. So what's wrong with suspending a kid if they get out of line? Like, let's talk for a minute about the whole notion of zero tolerance and what the problem is with exclusionary discipline.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
So point blank, when you send the kid home and you tell the kid that they can't come to school, what you're basically communicating to the kid is that we don't want you around.
Right.
And saying that to anyone is hurtful. Let's be honest. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care who you are. If you're somewhere where you know you have to be, because people tell you you have to be there, and you're told that you need this to be, you know, um, valued in society and be productive in society, and you're told by that same place that you can't be there because of something you've done, you're being communicated to that we don't want you. That's
Right.
how it's going to be taken. Also, what is the kid going to be doing at home? I mean, why, let's think about the origins of school in America. School in America wasn't started because we wanted to, teach kids necessarily. That's something that developed over time. Originally, this was a large scale babysitting service so the parents could work. And
Mm.
often we have two parents in the household working. So who's going to be there at home monitoring a kid probably in a situation with a TV, with a laptop, with a tablet, with their phone, with video games? Are you seriously believing that you kick that kid out and communicate to that kid that we don't want you here, that kid's going to be sitting at home the whole time doing their homework? Seriously?
Yeah. Right.
You
Right.
think that's going to happen? I mean, fine. If you think that's going to happen, by all means, you know, but they even don't consider that to be a punishment, but we do
Right.
for some reason.
Right. Well, and then consequently, typically the kid ends up further and further behind in their classes, and then they feel more and more not a part of the school, and then it just has a snowball effect typically. And I think even without somebody knowing the statistics, we've all seen this as teachers that a kid that gets suspended frequently is not going to be a kid who's succeeding in school.
And they certainly don't come back to school going, hey, I was wrong, sorry about that. I've
Right.
never seen that happen. Never
No,
seen that happen.
no.
I mean, I've been teaching for before I went to, this is my first year in administration. I was teaching for like 10, 11 years. I mean, it's it's just you don't see kids coming back from suspension going, "Hey, my bad," not
Right,
very
right.
often.
Right,
Um,
and that's the other big piece that RJ addresses is that typical, discipline doesn't ever really get to the point where the kid is remorseful about what they did and trying to repair it. It's just push them out and then just reintroduce them to school without much thought.
totally. Yeah. I mean,
Okay. Right.
again, if you don't do the groundwork, you know, suspension can be done correctly. There can be ways that you do it right, but you have to know the kid, you have to know the situation, and you have to be intentional about setting up systems to make that work. But again, it should be like the absolute total last resort, not the first.
I gotcha. Well, and then that's what zero tolerance policies in schools have been shooting for is we
Yeah.
need to teach them a lesson. We need to communicate to everybody, look, we don't tolerate this type of behavior. And so that seems to be from the reading that I've done on my own, that seems to have been a big motivator towards introducing RJ into schools is that we've just got this system now where kids are getting suspended for defiance and
They're
they're getting
also,
kicked out of school.
and they're getting arrested. I mean, let's
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
this.
Yep.
I mean, how think about how poor of a job you're doing, like as an educational system, when you have students that are forced to go into the system, right? Like they're forced to go
Mhm.
into the system. We know what happens if, students are truant. After a while, people get taken to jail, people get fined. Like we know that, right? Students are
Yeah.
forced to
Yeah.
go to school. And so if they're forced to be there and somehow throughout the system of their lives, they end up in jail or in prison as a result of being at school, a place that's supposed to be a place of learning now, right?
Yeah.
Like, exactly how is that on the kid?
Okay, I'm going to answer you like somebody who really believes in zero tolerance because I want to make sure that those people are not turning this off. I want to make sure that their questions get answered.
Yes,
They're they're
please,
they're going
please.
to they're going to say so you're telling me that a kid who shows up and throws a desk at a teacher,
Hmm.
we're just going to talk to him about his feelings and make him apologize and he gets to just come right back to class.
Okay, first of all, there's so much there to that.
I
Um,
know, I know. I wanted to
no,
throw it all at you at once.
there's so much there to that. I mean, I think that's so. If you are intentional as a teacher about creating personal relationships with your
Yeah.
individual students, no one's gonna throw a chair or a desk at you.
Right. That's always been my belief too.
It's
Yes.
not gonna happen. So like that
Right.
that's the first thing. Like again, preventative, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are measures to do after we get into that situation, right? So we have to actually sit down and wonder, why did the kid throw the desk or the chair at you? Had you done something to provoke that? If you had not done something to provoke that, why did the kid do that? It seems insane to me that anyone with some sort of rational mind would pick up a chair and throw it at someone without being provoked in some way, shape, or form. Maybe the student believes that you did or said something that is completely out of line. We as adults have to own that. You can't do and say whatever you want to another person that's attempting to become an adult. They have feelings, they have they have emotions too,
Mm-hmm.
and they have less control over them than we do.
Right. Right.
So, like when you look at it from the perspective of we know that what's coming into our classrooms at times can be a bundle of
Yeah.
emotions because we have no idea what happened when they went home. We have no idea if they got into a fight with their parents. We have no idea if their parents are getting drunk.
Mm.
We have no idea if they're being beaten or if they had to fight their way literally to school or if someone jumped them on their way to school or if We have no idea of
Right.
this. These kids and individuals are so complex that we can't just say, hey, you threw this chair,
Mm.
goodbye. We've got to figure out exactly what is going on, because I'm guaranteeing you that's not the normal, hey, I'm getting up to come to school today. Guess I'm going to throw a chair at someone. No one
No,
does that.
no.
No one says that. There's no one. And if you believe that, if you honestly believe that a kid intentionally woke up that morning, came to school with the mindset of, I'm going to throw a chair at a teacher, then I'm sorry. I'm not sure.
You
Whew,
don't need to be
let me not
teaching.
get to,
Yeah.
I don't need to
No,
get in that.
no, no.
No, I don't.
And yet, and I think it is that mindset, maybe not necessarily in those words. I think the way that I've seen that mindset more than anything is sort of the kids today mindset, or these kids in this neighborhood don't know how to behave, or their parents aren't teaching them manners. Like, so they don't necessarily think that the kid had that mindset ahead of time, but they think, well, this child has basically got no training basically
Well,
or whatever, and so they just feel like they're a lost cause already.
Well, that and that's kind of the other part of this, right? If you dehumanize
Mm,
someone,
mm,
right? When you refer to anyone out of their name, right? Because they're not these
yeah,
kids. They're Jeremy or
yeah,
Michael
mm,
or Matthew or,
mm,
Tayshawn. That's who they are, right? When you refer to them as these kids today and you lump them all there, you're
mm.
dehumanizing them. You're making it easier for you to look at the kids a certain way rather than investigate what is going on.
That's good, Victor.
Because if you know what's going on, you know who they respect, you know who's important in their lives, you probably have a better shot of getting them to not throw a chair at you
Right, right.
or or actually reach them and get them to be a part of the class.
Okay, let's get into some specifics about what RJ actually looks like sort of on a day-to-day basis. There are some kind of common features and practices that people typically associate with restorative justice. So, can you just
Yeah.
sort of run down a couple of those that you've used and that you typically see in RJ schools?
Yeah, so I should say not typically in RJ schools. Typically in RJ schools that do it right.
There you go. Good.
I have to say it like that. I
Okay.
have to say it like that because you have to be intentionally doing these things. So the teachers have to be intentionally working to create personal relationships within their classroom. So they're doing things like having circles and telling kids about their lives, telling stories about what happens to them. Getting the kids a chance to have an insight into their own personal culture, giving the kids a chance to talk about their own cultures. One of the things that's really huge that I really love is just asking, just take role asking a question.
Mm,
And it could start with it could start really base level. Hey, what's your favorite color?
yeah.
And just work its way deeper each day. And that way, that's a good way to get kids to get to know each other's personalities. You get to know their personalities. They get to know your personality because you start answering the question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, doesn't take long. Maybe it adds an extra 5 minutes to take and roll. But how long was roll going to take
Yeah.
anyway?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They can do that while you're doing a do now or a bell work or whatever you want to call it. Real easy, you know, real easy stuff. Uh, one things that, you also want to do is you want to do icebreaker games as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it reinforcing them getting to know one another, giving them a chance to get to know you. That's going to be really important going forward. You want to give them challenge type games that are safe. Puzzle games to work on together that are safe, because you want to build that growth mindset.
Okay.
And that's important with this as well. Because if kids know that if they believe that they can, and you've created by having them get to know one another, you're creating a community of support for the child in your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives them the ability to get some support if they're struggling.
Okay, good.
And these are things that you want to do. These are all things you want to start doing like day one
Mm-hmm.
when you start
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, because it's, you always want to, what's really good about restorative justice and it being preventative, you're thinking of the community you want to help create. I mean, you're gonna need to give them opportunities to have input into the rules and, all that other stuff. But, building the community that you wanna impress on them is pretty helpful as well. Um, Now there's when things go sour, this is helpful because then you can have healing circles and you can have mediation circles. Because if you laid the groundwork, and those type of circles are, when things go bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When there's like a death in the family or something happens, God forbid. I've seen schools use healing circles for suicides. I've seen schools use healing circles, loss of a teacher,
Mm.
teacher is being fired, teacher is being, things that go wrong because we know it could happen.
Right. What is it? What does a circle actually look like? I mean, I'm picturing literally people sitting in a circle. Are they in chairs? Is there a certain
Yeah.
structure to the way it's run?
I've seen them run a lot of different ways. I mean, I like chairs.
Mm-hmm.
I like chairs. I don't like desks,
Okay.
because you put something in front of them, it's not really a circle. They need to be, nothing needs to be separating them but air
Okay.
for me.
Okay.
A circle. So I like chairs. Some teachers have them standing.
Okay.
It really does depend on the configuration of your classroom,
Okay.
really, what you're privy to.
And
I've
is there like
seen.
an order that people go in? Do they take turns? Is there a person in charge of who gets to talk?
Well, there's a circle keeper, and the circle keeper doesn't always have to be the teacher. I mean, that's also important. You've gotta when you're creating a community, you've got to relinquish some power.
Mm.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to relinquish some power. You don't have to be the person talking all of the time. What's what's really helpful with this is a talking piece. And so what you want out of a talking piece is you want something that has some significance to you, some value to you or other students. Generally things that have stories attached to it.
Okay. So not a koosh ball.
No, probably not.
I'm thinking that's
I
usually what
mean,
got passed around in circles when I was in schools. It's past the koosh ball. So it's got to be something more important than that.
yeah, the more the more significant the story attached to the talking piece, the better.
Okay. Okay.
And that can come in a lot of different forms of ways. My wife and I made a Halloween costume one year. And so I have pieces of my Halloween costume that I use as a talking piece sometimes.
Huh.
I have gifts that have been given from students, from parents.
Hmm.
I have magnets that I've gotten when I've traveled. Um, you know, it,
Hmm.
it, it doesn't have to be something sacred to your culture. It can be just something that has a nice story attached.
Yeah.
Really, what's really big with this is giving. We tell stories to make these different connections with people. So if one of the things that makes for easy personal relationship building is telling stories. And any time that you can put something in there that has a story attached to it, that has a connection to your life, you, in a sense, become more human to your kids.
Yeah.
And they want to learn from someone that they like more often than they want to learn from someone that's cold and distant.
Right. Right.
Um, they like learning from people that they like and look up to.
Mm-hmm.
The more that they know about you, again, the less possibility that they're going to do something harmful to you intentionally.
Absolutely.
Um, and that's just what it is. So you need to talk in peace. And they
Okay.
pass the talking piece. They can, that's really up to you then at that point, how you want that to manifest.
I'm going to take a quick break to thank this episode's other sponsor, PeerGrade. PeerGrade is a platform that makes it easy to facilitate peer review in your classroom. Students review each other's work, while PeerGrade takes care of anonymously assigning reviewers and delivering all the relevant insights to teachers. With PeerGrade, students learn to think critically and take ownership of their learning. They also learn to write kind and useful feedback for their peers. PeerGrade is free to use for teachers and students. To learn more, visit cultofpedagogy.com/peergrade, PeerGrade. Now let's get back to the interview. I'm noticing something here on the notes that you took that you haven't mentioned, and I'm not sure if you're planning on getting it, but it says reintegrative shaming. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting phrase.
Reintegrative shaving. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things in the world. It is because it's a different way of approaching child behavior that I don't think that we utilize a lot. I think what we do is, we're prone as humans to typecast a kid. They develop a reputation, and we go with that.
Yeah.
So what reintegrative shaming is it's communicating to the student that, I know that you're a good person. I know that you're trying. I know that you're doing the best you can, but that action was shameful. It wasn't a good action. You shouldn't have done that. It's bad. You are not a bad person, but the thing that you did or the choice that you made was bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the conversation of framing the action or the thing that they've done as not being pleasurable or being shameful, rather than communicating to the kid that they are.
Okay. So it's the goal is to make them associate a negative feeling with what they did, to feel somewhat shameful about it, but not feel that it is about them as a person. It's the choice they made that was something that they should regret.
Right.
Okay.
And which is true. It's true.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you communicate to a kid over and over again that they're a piece of what, then guess what
Yeah.
they start to become? Like
Yeah.
exactly what you're telling them, right? If you want them
Yeah.
to be a good person, you remind them, hey, you are a good person, but this choice that you made was bad. And that's really how they should look at it too, right?
Right. So you've also got something here about restorative mindsets. And you mentioned that actually at the beginning when you said that you practiced RJ and that now you use a restorative mindset in your role. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Everything that a kid does shouldn't have to have a consequence. I mean, it shouldn't necessarily, um, unless it's necessary. Does that make sense? And so
It
what
does.
I
That's
mean,
going to blow a lot of people's minds to hear that.
well, I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, if a kid gets angry and says something to another kid, and that kid gets mad at that kid, do they need detention for that, or do they need to just fix the problem and not be mad at each other?
Mm-hmm.
Probably just fix the problem and not be mad at each other and go on about their lives. It
Right.
doesn't need a punishment for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, they didn't show up to school like, hey, I'm gonna fight with this kid unless something's very wrong, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
kid, like it's something that kills me. It's that mindset of you remembering what it was like for you to be in school, for you to be a teenager, trying to just get through life in that awkward stage, in that emotional stage, and when we were different stages of our lives, we weren't thinking of the things that we notice now as adults, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you remember that, then it's really easy for you to go, well, they just made that mistake. They just need to shake hands and move away. you know,
Right. Right.
maybe it's better that you just say sorry for this one, buddy.
Yeah.
Uh, maybe a written apology is a good idea. Maybe you should reflect on this. They don't need to be suspended because they chewed gum in class. I mean, let's be honest.
Oh,
I'm just
good Lord.
saying,
I know.
like some
Yes.
some it's this is the idea that, maybe the punishment or lack thereof should actually kind of fit the crime.
Right, right,
and
right.
and and if they didn't do anything wrong to the class or the community, and they just did something messed up to another student, they can handle that between the two students. You could facilitate that. It teaches them, hey, you have to be accountable for your actions, because your actions do have impact on other students without having them sit in detention, right?
Right, right. Well, and do you think, I mean, you think that teachers do take things too personally sometimes?
Yeah, that's a funny thing, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, I get it. I get it. I mean, it's something that we have to work on ourselves about, because it's really easy for us to think that students' behavior is about us, but we know it's not. We know psychologically they're not even thinking about us. They're thinking
yeah,
about them.
right. Yes,
their mind is completely on them 24/7. They're not thinking about us. They're not, like, their actions aren't happening like as an intentional thing to derail our lesson that we worked on till about midnight, like.
yeah,
I get it. I get it. You spent a lot of time on that unit. You spent a lot of time on that lesson. I get it. But sometimes your kids are going to do things that have nothing to do with you, that have more to do with what's going on in their lives. Again,
right.
let's remember, they they don't have sick days. They don't
Mm,
have bereavement leave.
yeah,
We do.
yeah, yeah,
Like, if someone dies that's close to us, we can take some days off and we can, deal with it. They can't. They don't have that opportunity.
no, they just have to show up and push through.
Right. If something traumatic happens to them, they don't get a chance to say, they don't decide that they can take the day off. They don't get that opportunity. They
Right.
have to be there. So, you know, with about out of I mean, most schools, most schools are like 500 to 2,000 kids.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure in America, with all of the different variables that's happening in different households, that one of your kids just had the worst night of their lives,
Yeah. Oh,
and they come into school because they have to.
oh,
And I'm going to guarantee you reacting in the most negative way to them might be the last straw for them.
yeah. Absolutely.
And that's got nothing to do with your lesson.
Right. Right.
Nothing. Nothing. Or you as a person.
Right. So it's been 2 years at your school now that you've been implementing RJ, correct?
Well, I was at a different school. I was at a different school. I was
I
at
gotcha. I gotcha.
yeah, and now I'm at this school.
Okay. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the successes that you've had either school?
Yeah, so I had a student last year. Um, one of the things that these personal relationships create is, you give kids someone in their corner when they don't necessarily feel like they have someone in their corner.
Mm,
You, the teacher, can do that, and that's something I had the pleasure of doing, being the advocate for the kid, um, because the kid then gains trust, and now you're the person that they're in your class, and they really want to pass your class. They really want to pass your class.
yeah.
They're now motivated because someone's on their side. And I don't mean on their side like I believe every single thing that happens to them, but I encourage, I learn more about them. The
Mm,
kids your toughest kids, you need to become the best friend of.
mm,
Because
mm-hmm.
when you do that over time, you start to see the growth that they have, because they start to trust you. They start to trust, that you have their best interests, and that, when they mess up, they'll actually listen to you telling them that. And
Right.
so I had some students that, they had made some poor choices in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But they also had, been dealt a pretty crappy hand.
Mm.
in life. And I don't think I would have found that out had I went digging for that.
Right.
Um, because so many people before I got to that child hadn't taken time to do the research and find that out. I mean, I was looking at this kid's cum file, and they're getting suspended for gum. They're getting suspended for
Ugh.
bringing food to school. And I'm thinking to myself, yo, they're eating food at school. So that's bad. Cause that's like, I thought that was
Mm.
something on Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
really. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we're really suspending kids for food. Are you serious? All right. I mean,
Wow. That'll
okay.
make you hate school for sure.
I bet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, so that's this kid. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the typical kid. They bounced around. This is that I had them. Let me tell you, this kid in particular that I'm thinking. I'm not using names because we're I have to reach out to that kid. I haven't spoken to that kid's mom in a bit, so I have to. I'm now that I'm thinking about this, I need to check in and see how they're doing. But
Yeah.
uh, that kid had, let's see, I taught ninth grade English. That child had transferred multiple times that year
Oh.
schools until they got to our school and in
Mm-hmm.
my class. And they stayed in my class and at our school for the longest period of time, like
Wow.
that they had been in the grade
Wow.
and was passing classes and was showing up to class. And so we're talking about a kid that's defiant. We're talking
Mm.
about a kid that was like in a gang.
Yep.
But what we don't realize as adults is that that defiance is them realizing that they have very little control in their lives and they're trying to take some control of something.
Mm. Gosh, I'm feeling so guilty listening to this because I'm thinking about a kid who showed up one of my last years that I was in the classroom, and I had heard the same thing about him, that he had been in 3 different schools that year, and of course he comes in partway through the year, and my first thought was to be irritated because it was going to mess up my roster, and it was going to,
Yep.
and he was, you know what I mean? And now I'm just
Yeah,
thinking,
no.
oh gosh,
I,
okay,
I've I've been there. No, no, I'm no,
yeah,
I understand. I've been there. Like there's a portion of when you like get educated on this and you read up
mm,
on this and you start to look at the mindset that really is a change and shift, you get mad at yourself
yeah,
because you can think back at that kid that you gave up on
yeah,
or that you were really hard on because they were just such a prick in your class. You just couldn't stand like I know, and I know sounds really terrible, but yes,
yeah,
I'm sure every person listening to this right now, you can name that kid
yeah,
that is just when they show up in your classroom, you're like, oh my God, oh, you're here today. Jeez. But you know what?
yes,
But you know what?
oh,
That kid is the kid that's there every day. You know why
mm,
that kid is there every day? Because
mm,
they don't want to be at home.
yeah,
Because
ah,
something is going terrible in their life. That's why they're appeal to you. They're appeal to you because they are severely hurt and or damaged. Because if they weren't, they'd be just like every other kid in your class, sitting down, paying attention, listening, following directions because they have a home when they go to that is loving environment where
yeah,
with people that they want to aspire to show that they can do well and they have people that they care about seeing them doing well. And so they have the mindset of I'm going to do my best and I'm going to, do well in school. Every kid has that when they show up to school, except those kids that need our love.
yeah. So I
And
I
that's
got
why
us
they're
off
appeal.
track. So this kid
No,
that
it's
you're
fine.
talking about, because you were about to tell me some stuff that's been going on with this kid. He stayed longest at your school. That was the longest period of time that he had
No,
been in
she,
that grade.
she,
Oh,
she,
okay,
she was,
okay,
oh
got
yeah,
it.
she was a little, yeah, she was into she was into the gang life.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things where, I think what we do is, when I was getting back to that dehumanization, we
yeah,
do
mm-hmm,
because we look at the kid in the colors and then we judge them. We judge them. We think they're dangerous. They're going to do
mm,
something horrible. We don't realize that there's a reason they joined that gang because
mm,
we've done enough to shame in our society crime. We've done enough to like you don't think that they think they're a piece of because
yeah,
they're in a gang. You
yeah,
don't think that they have some sort of self-esteem issue. because they're in a gang. And those kids are some of the brightest, most forethought students.
Mm.
They could be your best kid,
Yeah.
but they're not because somewhere down the line, something went terribly wrong. And they thought they can find solace in other kids that had something terribly wrong happen to them. So, it's that kind of situation we're talking about. These kids need more love, not less. And
Mm.
that's exactly what we give them.
So what tell me what else has gone well in your school in terms of, are you I mean, I'm assuming that you taught in schools prior to this where it was a more traditional model. So what else are
Oh,
you
totally. Yeah.
liking about being in a more RJ oriented school? Is it just you or is it the whole school?
Okay. So the school that I'm at in Oakland has been using restorative justice for 5 years. The school that
Okay.
I left in San Jose had just started.
Okay.
I was part of the group that really wanted to get it started and implement. And one of the things that I noticed at both of those places that I didn't really notice in traditional settings is the effect of mediation.
Mhm.
When you start teaching kids that they can talk out their issues rather than fight about them, they stop fighting about them
Hmm.
because they don't really want to fight.
Right,
Fighting
right.
takes a lot of work. I mean,
Yeah.
fighting is scary too. I mean,
Yeah.
you,
Oh
you,
yeah.
you know, you go into it and someone could hurt you and you can get hurt. And so
Mm.
if you can talk it out and you think that's a possibility that someone might also want to talk it out with you, then you're more prone to communicate and talk it out. And I've noticed that happening at both schools. When you emphasize mediation and you have kids, because kids are going to talk about it. They're going to talk about it with other kids. They're going to talk about what the process was like and what it was
Yeah.
like to sit down and talk out their issues. And they're going to be more likely to want to seek that out.
Do you offer, is it sort of formal mediation services where it's almost like advertised and the kids know what they need to do to request a session or a mediation?
Um, God, that's a good question. At the school I'm at now, it's kind of more of that. At the school that I started, we just sniffed out conflicts.
Ah, I gotcha.
Um, we just because you could tell. I mean,
Mm.
when you're in high school, it's not a big surprise who isn't getting along with someone else. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a very big secret. I mean,
Right, right.
especially in some sparse areas of the country, it's probably easier than others
Mm.
because they're actively doing something conflicting with each other. Like they're arguing with one another, or they're yelling at one another, or they're threatening to fight one another, or they're saying something on social media or something.
Mm-hmm.
You can find the conflict if you look hard enough.
Right, right.
You
Well, and
know,
that's part of being in tune with your kids and being part of the culture,
right?
having a trusting relationship is that they're going to reveal a little bit more of that to you.
Oh, totally. You're going to know
Yeah.
more about your kids. The more that you seek out information about your kids, the more you're going to learn about your
Right.
kids. Then you're going to know exactly who you need to make, who you need to, when you need to be a mandated reporter. You're going to know when when that's going to happen. You're
Mm-hmm.
probably going to get more opportunities for that. You're
Yeah.
going to know who needs to seek counseling and who needs to see a therapist. That's going to be obvious. You're
Right.
going to know who needs special services and who needs to get special services because you're going to know
Right.
you're going to be able to by learning more about your kids and learning more about their motivations and what makes them tick. Who's trying, who's not trying, who's trying their dangness and they need more help. And that's something that makes our jobs easier to do.
So you're seeing at sort of both of these schools, you're seeing a reduction in sort of physical fighting, and I'm assuming a reduction in suspensions and expulsions.
Oh, totally. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, without question. I mean, but again, it's because the kids get along with one
They
another
just get
mostly.
along better. Yeah.
Yeah, they get along better, so they fight less. There's less reason for them to fight because everyone knows everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yep.
it's it's not who's that kid over there. I don't know anything about him. It's oh man, Tommy yelled at me the other day. Well, you know what's going on with Tommy, right? Oh
Mm,
man, I heard about that. Yeah, okay,
mm-hmm.
you should sit down and talk at lunch. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's when you teach them how to fix their problems, they fix their problems. It's
Right.
pretty incredible.
So let's spend these last few minutes. Let's talk now to the teachers who are listening. They're like, this sounds good. I think our school needs this. It might be an administrator, it might be a single teacher. So what advice would you give to people who want to start making that shift from traditional discipline practices to an RJ approach?
Oh, I got a list for you. I got a
Okay.
list for you. Okay, so the first thing, first and foremost, investigate, read more into RJ. The book I always give is I always advise is the little book of Restorative Justice by Howard Zehr.
Mm-hmm.
Always, because it's a quick read. It's like 100 pages.
Yes, it is.
Um,
I just read it.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
real quick
really
read
clear.
too.
Mm-hmm.
And keep reading into it. Keep reading into it. I've read so far 4 or 5 books on it. I have a quest and thirst for knowledge because, just going to give you more ideas. The more you read, there are look into getting. There are lesson books for it too.
Okay.
You can always find those on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there. And a lot of them are really deep and detailed, and they take a lot of a lot of the difficulty away from you. Um, but but that's first and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got to dedicate yourself to identifying your biases and your triggers within your classrooms. Like you have to work on that. And that's something I had to work on. What, it, it's really painful for us to consider this, but if we walk into our classrooms and we really try to believe that an approach to color blindness is one that's effective, well, we're really shortchanging our kids' lives because if we're just constantly telling them, hey, I don't see color, when they leave your classroom, someone's going to see their color
Yeah. Yeah.
and someone's going to act possibly
Mm.
on the fact that they see their color. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not setting them up. We're setting them up for failure if we don't do our own investigation of, do I have any biases against any particular type of culture, any particular type of culture activity, any of my students, or do I have any things that trigger certain behavior or fears or anger that they do naturally.
Mm.
Um, you know, taking a step back and wondering, is it me or is it
Mm.
them?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Is what they did really that bad or is it me? That work is some tough work to do, but it can only happen if you work on that one.
Yeah. Boy, that
You
really, I think until somebody has actually embraced that idea, because I hear that all the time, the color blindness claim, and I think that is the most difficult shift to make for somebody. Because I think if somebody is going to start looking at their biases, they feel like what that means is admitting that they are a racist, and they're making a
no, it's
huge
not.
leap.
It's
They're
it's
making a
it's
huge
not.
leap from saying they're colorblind to saying I'm a racist, which is like,
No.
no, you have to just realize that we all have
Right.
biases. Yeah.
We do. Okay, so here's the realistic thing. We've grown up in a culture that has this stuff in it.
Yeah.
Like, let's think about it. Our cartoons when we grew up, Looney Tunes. There were
Mm.
Looney Tunes that had racially insensitive things in it. Like there are things in our TV today that have racially insensitive things.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
this is embedded into our culture. You're no more racist than, well, the culture that you identify to. So being aware, being aware of where these thoughts and these issues and these triggers come from doesn't make you racist,
Right.
right? It's willful, it's willful ignorance of it that does, if that makes sense.
Can you think of an example of a pretty common type of bias that you see a lot of teachers having that end up resulting in sort of discipline issues, that if they were to just recognize that thing as a bias, it would actually prevent these things from escalating?
Well, there's a few. I mean, is it really a big deal that your kid wears a hat? Um, is it? I mean, is it that big of a deal that they wear a hat? I mean, I get, maybe they should take it off in class, but you know, is it really a problem for them to wear it on campus? Is there a problem with your kid wearing a do-rag? Really?
Yeah.
That's not a gang thing. I've never seen that be a gang thing. That's
Yeah.
really random. I don't get that. Is it a problem for kids to wear hijabs? I don't get that. Is it? I don't,
Right.
you know, um, those sort of things,
Right. Mm-hmm.
sometimes we make rules without thinking about the kids that are showing up at our schools.
Right.
So again, but that's all that goes back into like understanding who your kids are.
Yeah.
If you know that it's part of their culture to do that, allow them to do that.
Right. Then it's not defiance.
Right. It's not
Yeah.
defiance because it's something that they do. It's accepted in their culture. Why not let them do that?
Yeah.
Um, then you're fighting a battle. You're fighting not a battle with the kid. You're fighting a battle with them, their way of being, their livelihood,
Mm.
and their connection to their culture and their family and their friends. I mean, aren't we supposed to be working with that, not against that? I mean,
Yeah.
so because I know we're running short. Let me make sure I get all this
Okay.
stuff in here.
Yeah.
So it's the bias training. You need to dedicate your classroom to building culture. You've got to dedicate to building culture in school. So you have to work on finding ways to include kids in what's going on, like allowing more student voice, allowing more student opportunities for them to display their culture, act on their culture, be a part of their culture. You need to give them opportunities to learn about people that look like them, that
Mm.
that are from their culture, that represent them. You have to give them opportunities to see people that look like them
Mm.
on campus. You've got to bring more people on campus, adults, caring adults on campus. Find ways to bring more caring adults on campus that look like your
Mm.
student body.
Mm.
You need I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna make some people feel uncomfortable. But if like 99% of your staff is white and 99% of your student body is black and Latino, you're going to need to figure out a way to get more black and Latino staff members in your school.
Definitely. Yep. And there's a
Period.
lot of ways to do it. Yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean firing your
absolutely.
staff. Yeah.
No, it doesn't mean firing your staff. It means finding ways to bring more of those caring adults on campus. You
Yeah.
can find you there are ways to make that happen. You can be intentional about hiring different paras. You can be
Mm.
intentional about hiring aides. You can be intentional about hiring coaches. You can be intentional about hiring mentors and consultants. You can find ways to get more people on your campus that care about kids that look like your kids,
Yeah.
and you should.
Yeah.
And if you also then find ways to learn about the neighborhoods, the communities, and find ways to bring people from the community and in the neighborhoods into your school, you're creating a school culture that the students can feel more at home in, like be connected to,
Mm.
so that if you so happen to have a situation where you feel that you have to suspend a kid, there are so many resources around you that you can tap into to really create the type of experience that you want out of that and make it into a consequence that actually would be viable. But again, that's going to take some creativity and that's going to depend on the student.
I have so many more questions to ask you. Everything you're saying, I want to like follow that thread. I hate that we're out of time, but
I'm always willing to come back. I'm always willing to
I
come
know.
back.
Well, and I also know how much gets, there's so many of these finer threads that get pulled on in the Voxer chat. You all talk constantly about
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
many, I can't keep up with it. So much every day. It's funny because when I first sort of joined that group and I started listening, I was like, huh, I'm not hearing anything like about circles or about like the stuff that you associate, because it was a lot more about this relationship building. And I think it's just really interesting. Like it really contributed to my understanding of RJ as a much more holistic thing.
Yeah, because it is. It is.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think what people want to do 9 times out of 10 in education is they want to take a thing and put their own spin on it, and they want to just make it easy. And
Yeah.
this isn't easy.
Right.
This has to be intentional. You have to be intentional about the things you're doing with this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then you're like, and I don't listen. That's why I started off with the, you have to build the personal relationships, because if you're not, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yep. And
Yeah.
that's not just plug and play.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. If you're not building personal relationships, staff to staff, students to students, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
admin to
Yep.
student, staff, and teach and
Mm-hmm.
all that. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
building personal relationship connections throughout the school, it's not going to work.
Not gonna work.
And you have to be intentional about it.
Victor, tell us where people can find you online and about the different opportunities for joining up with the RJ community.
Oh, well, I mean, we're, I'm blessed that you'd even say that. I mean, I think the RJ community is so much larger than our little Voxer chats and
Yeah,
Twitter
well, I know,
chats,
but
but
you're providing such an important window into that. I really feel like it's a gateway.
I like the terminology gateway. I'm gonna
Yeah.
roll with that. I
All
like that
right.
one. Okay, so you can find me on Twitter, Voxer, Instagram. My name on them is Mr. Small 215. That's MRSMALL 215. The same name for Twitter, Voxer, and Instagram. We've got the RJ chat on Twitter every Sunday. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, I think 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific West Coast time.
The hashtag for the chat, the Twitter chat, is that RJ League chat?
That is RJ League Chat. There's also
Okay.
the Twitter account that's RJ League Chat too, that you can follow. That's helpful
Okay, so
too.
it's the same thing. It's the at symbol or the hashtag is both. Both will get you to
Yeah,
that chat.
yeah.
Okay.
Both will get you there. And then if you want to join the Voxer group, it's a little, you can find it in a couple of different ways if you Google it. But the easiest way is just I tweet the link to the Voxer chat.
Oh,
So
there you go.
yeah, you could just go to that.
Okay. I can also put a link to it on the blog post that'll go with this interview too.
Oh yeah, by all
Yeah.
means,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
Victor, thank you so much. This has been really, you're great to talk to. This has been really, really good.
Oh well, thank you. I'm happy about that. It's really cool.
I
Thank you,
will,
appreciate that.
yeah, no problem. I hope this helps some, schools make this shift. And, I hope a lot of people I hope that they get the message that this is not something that they're going to just start tomorrow and everything's going to be like completely different starting tomorrow, that it's a slow process.
Well, okay, so one thing that I will say is that if you start trying to build personal relationships tomorrow, you're gonna see the effects of it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying that it's gonna be perfect, but it's gonna be a whole heck of a lot different. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Day one.
For links to all the resources mentioned in this episode, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 89. To get a weekly email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, and products, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day. This podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. To learn more, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.